Welcome back. A few weeks ago, we dedicated an entire half hour to the issue of dangerous disinformation in Spanish language media. This week, a new report was issued analyzing the broadcasts on Radio Mambi and other stations in the days following the January 6th insurrection. I discussed the findings with one of the authors of the report, Andrea Mercado from Florida Rising. Joining our discussion, Evelyn Perez-Verdia, a Colombian-American Democrat who was one of the first in the country to raise an alarm about how Spanish radio and social media were being used to manipulate voters in South Florida.
When the insurrection happened and so many of us were so horrified by the events in our nation's capital, we were hearing the reports of what was being said on Spanish language radio. And we thought it was a real opportune moment to document the kind of vile disinformation and lies that are being repeated over and over on incredibly popular Spanish language radio stations, and really expose the extent of disinformation and how it's undermining people's fundamental belief in our democracy and how it functions. And to then see not only radio shows legitimizing these conspiracy theories, but even elected officials joining, members of Congress joining and legitimizing these conspiracy theories. So it's a real problem, and the report actually has the audio clips, so people can hear for themselves, and then just really catalogs just in 1 week what was being said on Spanish language radio in South Florida.
Evelyn, let me bring you into the discussion now. We keep using words like misinformation and disinformation almost as if they're interchangeable, but they're not. They're very distinct words. So help me understand, what is disinformation versus misinformation?
Well, Jim, misinformation is when our abuelo or grandpa or something takes something that's on their WhatsApp or their Facebook page, and they don't know that what they're spreading is not true. It's false. It's not intended with the idea to spread. The person who's spreading it doesn't know it's false or fake. Disinformation is premeditated. It is intended to harm by spreading lies. Practically, that's what it comes down to.
It's calculated. In other words, there's an intent behind putting that information out there.
Yes, that's correct.
Andrea, you talked a little bit about members of Congress being involved, politicians being involved in some of what you found. The one case that I remember distinctly was, talked about what was happening in Pennsylvania, supposedly, where 200,000 more people were voting than were actually registered, which is, of course, was a tremendous lie. But yet that was being also promoted or supported by a member of Congress. What did you find there?
Yeah, it was Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar going on these shows and spreading outright lies that I think is really disturbing for those of us in the Latino community, when so many of our families came to this country fleeing undemocratic systems and dictatorships on the right and on the left, and really want to celebrate and uphold American democracy. So to see members of Congress denigrating our democracy in that way, and really shakes the foundations of our nation and our political system, denigrates our political discourse, and then just minimizing the extreme violence where police officers lost their lives, blaming Black Lives Matter, or shifting attention and talking about the protests for Black lives, with these false equivalencies, never saying that the vast majority of those protests were peaceful, which was reported on by many outlets around the country. So I think to have Representative Salazar and Representative Mario Diaz-Balart get on these shows, listen to people call in with these wild conspiracy theories and never challenge them, act as if fiction is fact, it's a real serious problem, and it spreads from Florida all over the country. It has ramifications all over the nation.
Is there something particularly egregious about this type of information being spread, this type of disinformation being spread in the Spanish language media? Because we see it in English language too, but do you find it more offensive that it's being done to folks who are often new arrivals to this country?
Well, Jim, that's a really great question, because if we look at South Florida in terms of our nation, South Florida has the most foreign-born residents from any other place in the world. And we have to understand that the politics of our country through their lens is seen through the politics of their country. So they see the things that happen in Colombia. And what they're doing, whoever this is who's starting this premeditated disinformation, they're targeting them by culture, by subculture, by accents. And, you know, we have started seeing this. I remember the first disinformation piece I saw was October 1st, 2018. And it was on a WhatsApp channel of a Colombian leader that Democrats and Republicans both in that time respected, that said, you know, let me show you this YouTube video about Andrew Gillum, the socialist, and Ron DeSantis, the capitalist.
Where do we go from here? Evelyn, let's start with you. You know, where does this need to go going forward?
We're not the intelligence community. We're just advocates trying to place light on something that we see is creating public harm, that we see that people in Hialeah went on buses to DC for an insurrection because they truly believed through this information that the United States was going to become the next Venezuela. And that's alarming. We need funding to protect our democracy, because our democracy is intentionally being weakened. Our democratic institutions are intentionally being weakened. So we need funding to make sure we give the truth to our communities.
I think that one of the things, though, that was so important about the report that you put out, Andrea, was the fact that it sort of put it out there, as you said, documented. What was powerful about it was the notion that you could hear the clips yourself if you wanted to. You didn't have to just take your word for it. You document it. That was a great report for that one period of time. Would it not be useful to do that on an ongoing basis?
Absolutely. I mean, I think from our point of view, there are three things that really need to happen. We have to see the ongoing monitoring of Spanish language radio, because oftentimes these program hosts and even elected officials feel like in Spanish they can say anything that they want and they won't be held accountable. And we need to expose the kind of lies that are being repeated. Two, there are very legitimate companies funding very illegitimate journalism that has no basis in fact, and they must be held accountable. And three, we have to Evelyn's point, we have to create more content that's fact-based, that's lifting up diverse voices and viewpoints, and develop an infrastructure to disseminate that content.
We'll be right back.